Welcome, chronicler of lost ages. Draw near to the light, for the tale we unveil tonight is not one of mere kings or mortal strife. It is a story of divine fury, of a war so vast it broke the very bones of the world, and of the day the gods themselves came to Middle-earth to wage their final, cataclysmic battle. For centuries, a shadow had bled across the lands of Beleriand. Morgoth, the first and greatest of the Dark Lords, sat upon his throne in the fathomless pits of Angband, and his victory seemed absolute. The great Elven kingdoms had fallen one by one. Nargothrond was a dragon's horde, Doriath was a ruin of kinslaying and grief, and the hidden city of Gondolin, the last great hope, had been found and utterly destroyed. Hope was a dying ember. The free peoples of Middle-earth were scattered, broken, and enslaved. The Noldoran elves, who had once come to this land in pride and defiance, were now a hunted people. The Edain, the great houses of men who had allied with them, were all but extinguished. The darkness was total. The despair was an ocean. And from the black fortress in the north, the laughter of Morgoth echoed across a conquered world. Yet, in this deepest of nights, one light still defied the shadow. It was the light of a Silmaril, one of the 3 hallowed jewels crafted by Fëanor, containing the pure light of the 2 trees of Valinor. This sacred gem was borne by Eärendil the mariner, half elven, half mortal, as he sailed the great seas on his ship, Vingelot, seeking a path that no mortal had ever found. His quest was one born of utter desperation. He sought Valinor, the undying lands, the blessed realm of the Valar, the godlike powers who had shaped the world. He sailed to plead for their aid, to beg for their pardon and pity on the suffering peoples of Middle-earth. He was the last desperate messenger of 2 kindreds, elves and men, facing their final extinction. Guided by the holy light of the Silmaril, Eärendil and his wife Elwing, who had joined him in the form of a great white bird, achieved the impossible. They pierced the veil of the Enchanted Isles, the magical barrier the Valar had set to hide their realm from the world, and they passed into the shadowy seas. At last his ship came to shore in the Bay of Eldamar. He had done it. He had reached the undying lands, but a great fear fell upon him. For it was forbidden for mortals to set foot upon these shores, and the penalty was death. Fearing the wrath of the Valar, he bid his companions to remain on the ship, and he alone stepped onto the hallowed ground. He walked into a land of profound silence. The city of the elves, Tirion upon Turna, was empty. The light was soft and strange, and a deep peace lay upon the land, a peace so profound it was almost terrifying to one who had known only war and sorrow. He called out, his voice echoing in the silent streets, but no one answered. He feared he had come too late, that even this blessed realm had been touched by some unknown doom. As he began to turn back to his ship in despair, a figure appeared before him, clad in white and shining with an inner light. It was Eönwë, the herald of Manwë, king of the Valar. Eönwë hailed him, and in the name of the Valar summoned Eärendil to come before them. The plea of the desperate mariner would be heard. Eärendil was brought to the council of the Valar, the Mahanaxar, the Ring of Doom. There he stood before the powers of the world, and he delivered his message. He spoke not for himself, but for the 2 kindreds. He spoke of the great darkness in Middle-earth, of the endless wars, the ruin of the elves, and the enslavement of men. He confessed the guilt of the Noldor, and the folly of mortals, and he begged for mercy and aid. When he was finished, a long silence fell upon the hall. The Valar debated this plea. For Eärendil, a mortal man, had broken their law by setting foot in the undying lands. But Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, spoke in his defense. And Mandos, the doomsman, acknowledged that the fate of Eärendil was not for him to decide. Manwë, the High King, delivered the final judgment. The plea would be granted. The Valar would not abandon the children of Ilúvatar to the darkness. As for Eärendil and Elwing, they would not be permitted to walk again among elves or men in Middle-earth. But because they had come on a mission of salvation, they were given a choice, to be judged with the kindred of men or with the kindred of elves. For Elwing's sake, who was of elven lineage, Eärendil chose to be counted among the firstborn. The Valar then took his ship, Vingelot, and hallowed it, and sent it soaring into the oceans of the sky, to be a new star of hope for the world. Eärendil, with the Silmaril bound to his brow, would forever sail the heavens. And so, the might of Valinor was roused. An army was assembled, the likes of which Arda had never seen, and would never see again. The Vanyar, the fairest of the elves who had never left the side of the Valar, marched to war, their golden banners shining like the sun. They were led by Ingwion, son of their high king. With them came the Noldor who had remained in Valinor, led by Finarfin, the brother of Fingolfin and Feanor. They marched to aid their kin, who had suffered for so long under the shadow of Morgoth, their hearts heavy with the memory of the kinslaying their people had committed. To cross the great sea, the Teleri, the sea elves, provided their magnificent ships and their skills as mariners. But they themselves did not go to war. They could not forget the slaughter at their own havens of Alquilande, the first kinslaying. And they would not wield a sword in the cause of the Noldor who had wronged them. They would ferry the army, but they would not fight. The arrival of the host of the West in Beleriand was like the dawning of a new sun. The sky was filled with their banners. The sea was crowded with their swan ships, and the sound of their trumpets shook the foundations of the mountains. The might of the Valar had come at last. The war that followed was not a single battle, but a long and terrible conflict that raged for more than 40 years. The host of Valinor swept across the northern plains, and the armies of Morgoth were scattered before them like dust in the wind. The orcs could not stand against the fury of the Vanyar, and the power of the elves of the light. Morgoth emptied his pits, and unleashed every horror he had ever conceived. Orcs beyond counting swarmed from the gates of Angband. Trolls and werewolves and creatures of shadow came forth. From the deepest chambers he sent his most terrible servants, the Balrogs, the demons of flame and shadow. The battles were fierce and devastating. The lands of Beleriand were torn asunder by the conflict. Rivers ran red with blood, and the air was thick with smoke and the cries of the dying. The power of the host of the West was immense, but the sheer numbers and malice of Morgoth's forces were beyond reckoning. Slowly, inexorably, the forces of evil were driven back. The host of Valinor fought their way to the very gates of Angband and broke them. They descended into the deep dungeons and fortresses, cleansing the pits of Morgoth's evil and freeing the countless slaves who toiled in his mines. The war seemed to be nearing its end, but Morgoth had one final, terrible weapon in reserve. As the host of Valinor pressed their final assault, he unleashed his ultimate creation. From the smoking peaks of the Thangorodrim, the mountains he had raised above Angband, there issued forth the winged dragons, a terror the world had never before seen. Led by Ancalagon the Black, greatest of all dragons, this new host filled the sky with their dark wings and their fiery breath. The assault was so sudden, so terrible, and so overwhelming that even the mighty host of the Valar was driven back. The fire of the dragons was a storm of death, and it seemed that Morgoth, in his final hour, would snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But as the darkness threatened to triumph, a new light appeared in the heavens. It was Eärendil, coming in his skyship Vingjalot, shining with the flame of the Silmarillion. The star of hope had become a warrior, and with him came all the great birds of the sky, and their lord, Thorondor, king of the eagles. An army had come to fight in the air itself. What followed was the greatest battle of all the ages of the world. For a full day and a long and dreadful night, Eärendil and the eagles fought with the dragons in the sky. The heavens were a canvas of fire and lightning, the roar of the beasts and the cries of the eagles echoing from the mountains to the sea. At the break of dawn, Eärendil faced Ancalagon the Black himself, the mariner in his hallowed ship, against the mightiest dragon that ever lived. Their duel was a storm of light against shadow, a contest that would decide the fate of the world. And Eärendil was victorious. He slew the great dragon, casting him down from the sky. The fall of Ancalagon was like the fall of a mountain. His colossal body crashed upon the peaks of the Thangorodrim, and the towers of rock and ice, which Morgoth had raised with such pride, were utterly broken and destroyed in his ruin. With the death of their greatest champion, the tide of the battle turned for the final time. The dragon host was defeated and scattered. The host of Valinor, seeing the victory in the sky, took heart and launched their final assault. They stormed what was left of Angband and descended to its deepest roots. There they found Morgoth. He did not dare to come forth and fight. He was captured, cowering in the deepest pit. He pleaded for pardon, but his feet were hewn from under him, and he was cast upon his face. He was bound with the unbreakable chain Engainor, which had been forged for him long ago. His iron crown was taken from his head and beaten into a collar for his neck, forcing him to bow his head in eternal defeat. The two remaining Silmarils were pried from it, and their light burned pure and unsullied once more. Morgoth, the prime source of all evil in Arda, was defeated. The Valar took him and thrust him out of the world, through the door of night, into the timeless void, to be imprisoned there until the final end of days. His power over Arda was broken, but the tragedy was not yet over. The two remaining sons of Feanor, Maedhros and Maglor, driven by their terrible, unbreakable oath, stole the two recovered Silmarils from the camp of the Valar's army. But the jewels, being hallowed, now burned their unclean hands with an unbearable pain, for their deeds had been evil. In his agony and despair, Maedhros cast himself and the Silmaril he held into a great, fiery chasm that had opened in the earth, and so one of the great jewels found its end in the heart of the world, and Maglor, who could not bear the pain, cast his Silmaril into the great sea. And so the last of the hallowed jewels found its home in the deep waters. Maglor himself, last of the sons of Feanor, never returned to his people, but wandered forever upon the shores of the world, singing in pain and regret beside the waves. The quest for the Silmarils was over. The war was won, but the cost was unimaginable. The fury of the conflict between the host of Valinor and the armies of Angband was so great, so violent, and so world-altering that the land of Beleriand itself could not endure it. The earth was broken and rent asunder. The great sea, Beleriand, rushed in through the cracks and canyons. The northern lands of Middle-earth were utterly changed. The beautiful realm of Beleriand, the stage for all the great deeds and sorrows of the First Age, was drowned beneath the waves. All the grand cities, the deep forests, and the tall mountains sank into a watery grave, lost to memory and time. The War of Wrath had ended not only the reign of the first Dark Lord, but an entire age of the world, and had reshaped the very face of the earth in fire and flood. The price of victory was a drowned continent, a testament to the power of the gods when their wrath is finally unleashed. The echoes of that cataclysm still shape the world. If this tale from the dawn of time has awakened the lore master within you, honor its memory with a like, and subscribe to our chronicle so that you do not miss the next chapter. Until our paths cross again, may your light never falter.